Damien is an undercover cop working a case to bring down a huge drug-dealing operation. He pulls up to the gang HQ and gets searched before being led to the boss to pick up his next consignment of drugs to sell. After joking with the boss, he reaches for his batch, but the leader comments on his twitchy nature this time around. Damien denies it and even asks if the boss wants to discuss something with him, which he does. The Kingpin alerts his golden boy that they have a snitch in their ranks. Damien looks around to find some berry men closing in on him, but he plays it cool and offers to deal with the rat with excitement. The boss starts to describe the rat, and it fits Damien perfectly, but he still tries to act oblivious till one of the men holds a gun to his head. The cop quickly disarms him and uses it to shoot the boss who's taken away. Waves of gangers charge at him as he shoots and beats his way through them. The kung fu cop gets hit by a car when trying to find his bearings, but he manages to recover and beat down the one who tried to make him roadkill. After dealing with the last attacker, Damien proceeds to the boss who crawls suffering from his gunshot wound. The Kingpin slices him with a knife when he tries to apprehend him. He then snickers as he alerts the cop that he has already found out where he lives and comments on how beautiful his wife is. A look of dread washes over Damien's face as he rushes home to find the place already broken into. He makes it into his vandalized home looking for signs of his wife, only to see her lifeless body in their marital bed. The devastated husband holds her whilst weeping. At a later time, history teacher Simon settles his class down. While he takes the register, he notices Jasiek is absent for the second time consecutively. Emilia explains that the lad is using drugs. Simon's son Camille also happens to be in his class and receives a call from Jasiek's mum alerting him of her son's passing due to the drugs. Meanwhile, Damien is depressed after his wife's death. The ex-cop spends all his time locked inside drinking himself to sedate his pain. His phone rings, but he ignores the call. It is revealed that Simon is on the other side of the line. The teacher pleads with his old friend for help as he stands in front of Jasiek's house. Damien kind of cleans himself up and makes his way to Simon's house as he drinks the alcohol like it's water. He has dinner with his old friend and his wife as they discuss Jasiek's case, as well as the numerous incidents of drug abuse at the school. The teacher alerts the ex-cop of the gang of seniors that usually sell drugs in the open. After they finish eating, the two friends continue their discussion in the kitchen where Simon begs for his help as he feels like he has found the location of their operation. Based on his investigations, it's bigger than it seems. Camille comes down and overhears Damien refusing to help his dad, stating that he can't even help himself, let alone the teacher. The kung fu cop enters a convenience store to stock up on booze, where he's pickpocketed by some local hooligans. He makes light work of them when they attack him for requesting his wallet back. In the interim, Simon decides to conduct his infiltration solo. As he tries to pick one of the locks, someone approaches him from behind. The following day, Damien wakes up to news reports of Simon's death. His body was found at a fentanyl manufacturing lab, framing him as the culprit who makes and distributes it to the kids at public schools. His death was made to look like a self-annihilation to create the narrative that he was guilty, that Jasiek died from using his products. Damien rushes to the house to comfort his friend's wife and child as he doesn't believe the fake narrative. With the help of his old connections, he begins his undercover investigation by first getting a chance to apply for his old friend's job. The principal's secretary tries to dissuade him from applying for the job since the school has such a bad reputation. The principal interrupts, taking him to the office to conduct the interview. He explains about the school's narcotic problem, but assures the prospect that it should be resolved now that the manufacturer is dead. And with the appointment of the new security agency headed by Chmielski and his crew, things should be fine. They are soon joined by the assistant principal, Agata, who doubles as the Polish teacher. After a brief introduction, he's given the job and is to officially start the following day. The next morning, Jarek and his crew try disrespecting Jasiek's memorial at school, but Damien confronts him about it. He calls on Mammoth, who wants to join the gang to attack the new teacher, but the teacher dodges just as Chmielski and his men halt the commotion. The head of security starts to question Damien, but Agata explains that he's the new history teacher before dragging him away. As she leads him to his class, she explains the situation and introduces him to some of the teachers. Damien enters his hectic class and immediately asserts his authority when he confronts Frogface, a lad who dropped out 3 years ago and is trying to sneak his way back in now that there's a new teacher. Agata gets word of his presence at the school and calls Chmielski, but before he escorts him out of the class, Frogface makes some inappropriate comments to the assistant. After school, the principal notices that Damien is staying back late to prepare learning materials and commends him for it. Meanwhile, in the underground parking lot, Agatha gets harassed by Frogface and his boys. During that interval, Damien comes out to find his car tires have been slashed by the students. One of the male teachers advises him to use the underground parking next time, and he offers to give him a lift. The two men arrive to meet the assault. Damien orders Frogface to let her go, but he holds her at knife point and orders his boys to attack the new teacher. Unbeknownst to them, he's a kung fu master, so he makes light work of the fools, but he sustains a cut on his hand. The delinquent gets scared and release the teacher before escaping. Agatha hugs Damien as she sobs. The two go back up to class where she tends to his cut. She was smitten by his martial might, but he downplays it as a hobby. The fake historian shows her some techniques she can use if she ever finds herself in such a situation again. Agatha asks if there is any way she can repay him on some kinky level, but Damien is a high-value man, so he requests she gives him a lift since they slashed his tires. Meanwhile, Frogface is abducted and brought to the beachside where it is revealed that their boss is Chmielski. He punishes him for trying to go behind the gang's back to make some extra money. Yarek orders Mammoth to break his leg as they beat him up. The following day, Damien comes into school to find that his car has been towed away for repair, courtesy of the principal. He enters the staff lounge to find the other teachers watching his martial display the previous night from the CCTV cameras. Agatha admires him as they serenade him with praise and thanks. Chmielski comments on how easily he took them down before asking who is he really, but he plays the humble historian card. Damien enters the class to find Harry imitating his moves. The students also have the footage and question him on how he acquired the skills. He gives a Bruce Lee quote before Harry asks how to handle oneself in a street brawl. The teacher challenges him to find out what he's got. If Harry wins, there will be no final class exam. The class goes to the gymnasium where he toys with the young lad, showing the difference in their skill. Damien notices that Camel has finally come back to school, but he leaves when he sees his dad's old friend. He follows him to the changing rooms where he assures him that he knows that his dad was framed and wants to prove it. The angry teen attacks Damien for turning his back on his dad when he came for help, blaming him for his death. The ex-cop feels the same way, and it's killing him inside, which is why he's there to get revenge for his friend. He pleads to Camille to help and keep his identity a secret, but the young lad uses the words Damien used on his dad the night he asked for help before leaving. After school, Agatha asks him out on a bar date, which they use to also look through some of the students' work. She brings up Amelia's essay, which describes how her single father raised her and supported her when she got addicted to fentanyl. The two teachers flirt a little when she checks to see how his hand is healing. Damien goes to get them more drinks when a few big men try to give some ladies trouble. He comes to their defense and beats them to the cheering crowd. The teachers leave the bar soon after, and she invites him over to her place where they engage in unauthorized lessons. As she goes to get them more alcohol, he notices that she didn't lock the door, and she makes the same comments as his deceased wife about him being there to protect her. This triggers flashbacks of the good times he spent with his wife, as well as the day he came home to find her dead. The flashback kills his lust and deflates his clown balloon. Agatha comes out excited with the drinks to find that he has left, which makes her upset. As he walks back home, he comes across Mammoth dealing drugs, so he aggressively warns him to stop following the bad actors since he has a bright future. The following day, Amelia spots one of her friends buying drugs from the school gang, so she rushes to stop the sale. Shortly after, Jarek and his boys surround her as a punishment for trying to block business and begin to harass her. Camille sees the commotion and comes to offer his friend aid, but he gets beaten up instead. As the bell rings for the first period, Damien crosses paths with Agatha for the first time since he left her high and dry. The assistant principal doesn't exchange pleasantries and proceeds to coldly give him information about the new class registration system before leaving. Class starts when Camille and a few students come in late. Damien notices the injuries on Camille's face and tries to find out what happened, but they are reluctant to tell. He figures out that it was an assault from the gang. Seeing his students getting bullied doesn't make him happy, so he offers to teach them how to defend themselves after school. He takes them to an old warehouse where they clean up the place and turn it into a dojo. All the while, Damien was doing his investigations and found the location of one of the gang's stash houses. He anonymously tips the police, who raid the place and apprehend 2 gang members. Chmielski watches him while he watches the raid. One night after a martial arts session with his students, he's attacked by Chmielski's men in balaclava. Although he takes some damage, he manages to fend them off as they come out worse off. The following day at school, he confronts their boss for their little attack, but the students come out of class before anything happens. Jarek suggests another way for them to get rid of the new teacher. They visit Amelia's dad at his shop and try to harass him, but she comes in to see what they want. Jarek shows her Simon's watch, insinuating that they killed him. He instructs her to lie that Damien was inappropriate with her after one of their martial arts sessions. The following day, He comes into school to a hostile look from Agatha. The principal confronts him about Amelia's false accusations before suspending him indefinitely till an investigation is complete. Camille just takes the claims at face value and begins to berate his dad's friend for taking advantage of their trust, while Jarek and his crew laugh at their handiwork. Later that night, Damien sneaks into Amelia's room to find that she has relapsed back into drug use due to the guilt. She explains the conditions of Jarek's threat. Her dad barges into the room and kicks him out, thinking that he's the one enabling his daughter's behavior. Damien later visits Frogface in the hospital as he recovers from the beatdown. After some persuasion, the hooligan hints that the drugs are made in the school, so he goes to Agatha's housing where he manages to take her school keys before she sacks him away. He infiltrates and finds that the science teacher is the one cooking up the drugs for the gang.
Goddamn right.
He tries to get picture evidence, but the glare from the light leads to a bad shot. He tails the van that moves the excess drugs out of the school to a food processing plant. He tries to break into the car, but the security spots the kung fu cop, so he uses his skill to take out his attackers. He calls Agatha of his findings, so the following morning, they hold a meeting to get to the bottom of his accusations, but with his poor evidence, he's just escorted out of the building again. Agatha decides to visit Amelia again. This time, the girl tells her the truth, so she rushes to Damien's place to apologize. He shows her the CCTV footage from the night he infiltrated, but it seems that they have been tampered with. The two later catch up with the science teacher as he packs his shopping. Some say that is when a man is at his most vulnerable. He pins him to the car where he confesses that he cooked the drugs for them because they threatened to kill his family. Chmielski rides by and assassinates the teacher before he can give too much information. The school later gives the deceased teacher's things to his wife. The principal gives his condolences to her. He calls Agatha to clear out Simon's locker too, and as she does, she finds a notepad stuck to the top of his locker. Meanwhile, Amelia comes back to school where she clears Damien's name. The students later come to the dojo where they apologize for their misjudgment. They all rush to the hospital when they get word that Amelia was attacked for retracting her statement. Agatha shows Damien Simon's notes, which indicate the location of the gang's main warehouse. The ex-cop Solo raids the location, but he's joined by Agatha, who wants to help. They find the drugs but get surrounded by Chmielski and his men. Shortly after, the principal makes his grand entrance as the mastermind behind the whole operation. He fed into the negativity when he realized the school couldn't be changed to anything better, so he gave the students what they wanted. He wears Simon's watch to tease them before taking his assistant away. Mammoth stands forward to confront the gang he wanted so badly to be a part of. He's joined by the rest of the students who overpower the gang. Chmielski and Damien have their final face-off, and although the villain puts up a good fight, he has a shocking end. The ex-cop catches up to the principal, who has Agatha at gunpoint. She uses the technique he showed her earlier to get free, allowing Damien to knock him out. They turn around to leave, but he gets up and removes his concealed gun and shoots the ex-cop. But before he can finish them off, Camille drops a consignment of garden gnomes on him. Damien retrieves his friend's watch from his unconscious wrist. Soon after, they call law enforcement, who take all the criminals into custody. He gives Camel his dad's watch. His mom rushes to check if he's okay while the other students celebrate their victory, bringing the movie to an end. On to the next story. Young Nico prepares to record himself playing his guitar while a storm brews outside. The news report on the fall of the Berlin Wall as the year is 1989. He cuts off the broadcast and begins to sing, but shortly after, his mother interrupts his recording to alert him that she's off to work. She enters her car to find a cassette with a note in it from her son. She plays the tape of Nico singing as she pulls off. Back inside, the young lad ends his recording session when he overhears commotion from his neighbor's house. He looks out of his window to see Prieto and his wife Hilda having a physical altercation. Nico decides to sneak into the now eerily quiet house. While he wanders inside, he admires a lovely picture of the couple before proceeding. Nico turns the corner and gasps as he sees Hilda's lifeless, bloodied body on the floor. He rushes over and calls to her, hoping she's still alive, but gets no response. His neck snaps up when he hears heavy footsteps, only to find Prieto descending the stairs holding a knife. Nico does what most people don't in these situations, and 10-toes himself out of there. He stumbles to the floor while checking his shoulder as Prieto follows and calls for him to wait. As Nico crosses the road, a van knocks him down. Prieto comes out with the knife still in his hand as the driver shouts for help. Others start to come out while Nico bleeds out from his head. The husband drops the murder weapon as he sinks onto the ground in disbelief. Some time has passed since that incident, and Vera wakes up next to her daughter in their new home, which happens to be the one Nico and his mother stayed in the past. She gets a call from her husband David, who alerts her that he's back from his business trip, but he has to go straight to work for some important meetings. Meanwhile, across the road, Ater prepares to leave for work. His mom, Clara, looks at the weather and is worried about how the upcoming storm seems similar to the one that happened years back. Ater dismisses her rambling as he says his goodbyes. Vera also prepares to leave with her daughter, so she asks the moving men to leave the keys with the neighbors across the road when they are done. Ater beeps to get her attention, and they have a very friendly conversation where she invites him and his mother for dinner. Vera later makes her way to work where her role is a theater assistant at a hospital. While she prepares for surgery, the weather broadcast warns that the storm is a repeat of the one that hit in 1989. She comments on her colleagues Monica's short vacation, but the woman quickly changes the subject and asks how she's finding her new house. After her shift, she goes to pick up her daughter, and when they get home, she surprises the kid with a swing she had installed. As the two play, they notice the storm is brewing, so they make their way inside, where Vera sneaks up on her husband who's unpacking. She comes across an old picture of him and his ex-girlfriend, so David starts to tease her for being jealous. They then go to clear out a storage area and find Nico's old equipments to their amazement, but as they touch it, the light flickers. The family later set it up to watch one of the tapes. David gives some trivia that the one they are currently viewing was recorded on the same day, but in 1989. It happens to be the one Nico recorded just before the incident. He removes it when it ends and sits back with his family, but the light flickers again as the thunder strikes. Suddenly, the TV comes back on again, playing the news broadcast from 1989. They look on spooked out as there is no tape in the player and networks don't broadcast in analog anymore. The couple thinks nothing of it and later hosts their neighbors for dinner. It is revealed that Ater and Vera were together in the past as he jokes around about David coming in and stealing her away from him, but we know that he's salty about that one. Talk moves to the tapes that they found of Nico, so Ater discloses that they were good friends before informing them of the circumstances that led to his death. Prieto got arrested for the murder of his wife as a result. His mother starts to get uncomfortable about the topic and uses the little girl as an excuse to get him to stop. After dinner, the kid gets scared by the story and the weather as Vera puts her to bed, but she assures her that everything will be fine. She then joins David, who's looking at the Nico Prieto case. He informs Vera that Prieto confessed that he planned to hide his wife's body under his animal processing plant if he wasn't caught first. From his research, he finds out that the guy took it upon himself to climb the stairs to the afterlife months after being jailed. She tries to change the subject while sorting out the dirty laundry, but he carries on in an attempt to understand why someone would do such a thing. Things get intense when she finds some matches in his pants. She confronts him for smoking again, but he matches her energy for a moment before pretending to be joking. He apologizes for the lapse and throws them out of the window. Late that night, the storm picks up, but Vera is woken up by the retro TV when it comes on again by itself. As she prepares to turn it off, the video of Nico setting up the camcorder starts to play. She checks to find that there is no tape inside and goes to turn it off, but lightning strikes the house, causing Nico in 1989 to see Vera, who's 25 years in the future. They both check the camera and are startled that they can talk and see each other. Vera uses it as an opportunity to warn the young lad of the events that led to his death. She shows him the news articles from her phone to try and convince him. Vera even informs him that his school will be closed the next day because of the lightning strike hitting the school clock. Nico understandably gets spooked out and runs away, while she shouts for him not to go outside. The TV flashes in Vera's room before things black out. All of a sudden, the scene switches to Nico running out of Prieto's house, but this time, he's not pursued or hit by the car. With the events altered, Clara calls the following day to inform Nico's mother that she's not well, so her brother Roman will take the kids to school. Nico alerts her about what happened the previous night while she was at work. In the present, Vera wakes up confused as she lies in a hospital bed. A nurse notifies her that they are waiting for her, so she nervously enters the operation theater. To add to her already confused state, she's presented with the patient she assisted with the previous day. The nurse addresses her as Dr. Vera, while informing her that the patient laying before them is hers. She gets spooked and rushes out. The lady goes to her daughter's school and asks one of the kids about her daughter, but the girl has no knowledge of her. The mother tries to talk to one of the teachers, but they don't recognize her or recall her daughter ever going to that school. Vera frantically makes her way to David's office, and he too doesn't know her. She starts to get upset, revealing to him that they have a daughter together, to his confusion. The police are called, and she's taken to the station where she explains the crazy situation to Inspector Larira. The inspector is interested in the last thing she remembers before things changed, so she recounts the situation with Nico and how she tried to save him. After hearing Vera out, he reveals that their records show that she doesn't live where she stated. She is not married to David, and also there is no birth certificate for her daughter. There are no photos of her anywhere, including on Vera's phone. This life she speaks of only exists in her mind. Larira takes Vera to her hospital where they scan her brain for abnormalities, but everything is clear. After this, her colleague gives her a file on David, who happens to be the first patient she operated on leading a surgical team. Although she agrees that he did have the procedure, she didn't operate on him as that's not her job. Her colleague shows her office to her with all her achievements on the wall, proving that she's not only a doctor but the best in the hospital. But he gives a possible explanation for what he thinks is a manic episode. She lost a young female patient on the operation table just recently, and he feels like the trauma has caused her to weave a story with her first and last patient as a coping mechanism. Everything starts to click when her attention is drawn to the window as the thunder from the upcoming storm strikes. She rushes out while informing Larira that the storm has something to do with these strange occurrences. Maybe she saved Nico, and that is what caused everything to change. So she rushes off in her car to find out if he's dead or alive. Meanwhile, back in the 80s, Nico gets to school and also gets freaked out to see that what Vera told him was true. Ramon returns them to Clara's house, where Nico looks out to Prietol's house and asks Aitor if he believes in time travel. The young lad later sits in his room drawing a picture of Vera when his TV comes on again. It's not clear, but someone can be seen on the other side. Nico calls, but the connection suddenly cuts. He looks out of his window to see Roman giving Prieto plane tickets and a passport. Later that day, he sees Prieto leaving his house and decides to ring the doorbell to see if anyone else is home. When he gets no response, he makes his way past the barking dog and breaks into the house. He wanders around and checks the bathroom to find Hilda's dead body in the tub. He remembers Roman giving Prieto some documents, so he checks the bedroom drawer and finds a fake passport with Clara's picture, but with Hilda's name. But unbeknownst to Nico, Prieto is back from his animal processing plant, where he went to get some items to help with the body disposal. The sound of the garage door opening alerts him, so he quickly hides under the bed and finds a watch with the initials CW engraved on the back. Nico is forced to witness Prieto dismember Hilda's body, and after several hours he finally finishes. As he prepares to leave with the parts in suitcases, a call comes in from Clara, alerting him that she left her watch in his bedroom. He assures her that he will find it as he looks at her from his window. They profess their love for one another before ending the call. Nico overhears everything. Prieto checks under the bed and doesn't find anything. The boy is now hiding behind the chair. Back to the present, Vera makes her way to her house to find that it has already been broken into. She heads straight into the storage room, and to her shock, the old TV and recorder are not there. She uses a nearby computer to check if Nico died in 1989, but a book called Mirage detailing the other timeline's events comes up instead. She's confronted by Ursula, but as she tries to explain the situation to her, David enters. The two are married. She's shocked and heartbroken as he calls the police to alert them that there is an intruder in his house. The storm strikes again, which causes a power outage. She uses it as an opportunity to escape the house. As the police draw near, she hides in Prieto's backyard. When the power comes back on, she is surprised to see him out of jail and alive. He is also happily married to Clara. Because of their dark secret, the police presence scared them. Larira knocks on their door while doing a neighborhood sweep looking for Vera. Shortly after, Aitor comes out to check on the commotion before heading to work. While driving, he gets startled when Vera pops out of the back seat. She explains that she knows he's a pilot, among other intimate details that only someone who knows him would be aware of. He takes her to the airport where he listens to her story of how they met on a train, among other things. Although he enjoyed the tale, he shakes her farewell as the story didn't happen. When their hands touch, she sees the events of his timeline and they didn't meet on the train that day. She starts to ask about Nico, but Aitor is fed up at this point. She reveals that Prieto killed his own wife before marrying Aitor's mother, but the pilot doesn't believe this accusation. His uncle Roman, who works at the passport checking station, asks his nephew if all is well after witnessing the commotion. After Aitor walks away, her attention is drawn to an interview with the author of the book about the coincidences that are coming to pass. The inspector finally catches up to her. They go to a library to find the book. She shows that the story in there is real, and the woman from the future is herself. Credit is even given to Nico for inspiring the story, as the author heard it from his mother. They visit the author, and she claims that the story was completely made up by the boy, so she referred them to a psychiatric specialist. But since the author is also a professor of physics, She postulates that things can be restored if the same conditions can be met. Vera sets a timer for how long the storm is going to last and pleads for Larira's help to find Nico, but he can't get the search warrant without solid proof. Vera remembers that Prieto confessed to where he was planning on hiding the body in her timeline, so she informs the inspector of the location. They check and find the suitcase with the bones of the dead body inside. The forensic examination needs to be done to identify the person. Till then, Vera is also considered a suspect to her surprise. She breaks down in the car because of the lack of help. Larira feels for her, so he gives her a hotel address with a room number where she could find some answers. Vera makes her way there to find David and her colleague Monica having a good time. She notices the matches on the table as the same ones she found in his pants at her timeline, meaning he was probably cheating on her there too. She looks past it and blackmails him to find Nico's new address. In the interim, the police arrest Prieto, Clara, and Roman while they celebrate Prieto's birthday. The events of Hilda's death start to play. She caught Prieto and Claire having an affair. The wife got enraged and tried to kill them with a knife, but as the three of them fought for the knife, Hilda was stabbed by accident. Using Roman's connections in the airport, they forged the passport so that Clara could travel as Hilda to create the story that Hilda left Prieto for her ex-boyfriend in Berlin when the wall fell. Larira presents the evidence and explains how Nico's accusations of Prieto committing the murder were dismissed because he was found to have broken into the house to steal the watch. The young lad's case wasn't helped by his unbelievable story about the woman from the future. He was forced to apologize and hand the watch back, but his description of the engraved initials on the watch is what ties Clara to the scene. Larira explains that Nico moved away and became obsessed with proving that he was right, but all he could do was wait for the woman from the future to come back and give him the final pieces of the puzzle. During that time, he underwent tests that proved he was not lying, but he was still sent to a psychiatric hospital for his claims. There he stayed quiet till he was released. But he remembers the train station sign at the back of the room during his first encounter with Vera, so he went to the station every day. A time lapse of Nico growing reveals that he's Larira. In the present time, Vera goes to the address of Nico's place and is surprised to find that it's Larira, and she married him in this timeline. Her meeting him at the train station instead of Aitor is what changed the timeline so much. Nico's mom instructs her to wait for her son. He joins her shortly after and explains the altercation in events to her. He kept silent because he was hoping that she would remember their life together, along with her past life. He broke into the house and took his old TV and camcorder. The inspector kisses her, which triggers her to remember her life with Nico in this timeline. With tears in her eyes, she still wants her old life. Vera forces him to rewrite this back to the way things were by jumping off the building and falling to her death. Nico quickly runs to check on his wife before connecting the TV and camcorder. The storm is still going on, so he manages to get into contact with his younger self and explains the situation to him and what to do to rectify everything. Vera wakes up next to her husband and her daughter back in her life. She checks for the old TV and camcorder, and they are not there. She happily hugs her husband but remembers about the matches, so she goes outside and finds them. She asks David where he got them, and he lies that it's from his recent business trip. Yeah, right, he was handling a different kind of business.
City boy, city boy.
They are interrupted when Prieto and Claire wave them good morning. She is happy that Nico kept his promise. Vera rushes to where Prieto hid the body. She digs it up and calls the police. She waits for Nico to come to the scene where she introduces herself smiling. Although he doesn't recognize her, Vera promises him that he will soon enough. That brings the movie to an end. On to the next story. French army officer Abdel somberly makes his way to give a press statement regarding the brutal killing of his younger brother, Idir, as a result of police brutality at the Athena council estate. This is an attempt by the establishment to de-escalate tensions around the country, as it's the third case of police misconduct in less than 2 months. As he addresses the press, a mob of Balaclava youths led by Karim, who is also a brother of Abdel and Idir, attack the police station in which the press briefing is being held. While civilians hectically evacuate themselves from the premise, the mob charge in and start looting and vandalizing the place. A disoriented Abdel calls for his brother as he navigates through the chaos. Concurrently, Karim is also on the move as he orders his unbanned army. With his direction, they find a safe full of weapons, but can't access it, so they load it onto a hijacked police van and escape. The police try to give chase on foot, but the mob taunts them. As they parade down the streets, it is apparent that parts of the city is in chaos. Their van even gets attacked when it gets mistaken for the police, but Karim jumps down to confirm that they are allies. He continues on foot, and from the large number of rallied-up youths around, They have arrived at their HQ, the Athena Council Estate. Some build up their defenses with what they can get their hands on. Meanwhile, Kareem is shown the matching sports tracksuits taken from a local football club. This is to further make them indistinguishable from one another when confronted by the police. He's also presented with a walkie-talkie so that he can better coordinate with the large army. As they bring the weapon safe into the building, Kareem is met by some of the older residents. Although they share his grief for his family loss, they are equally worried for their own family's safety as the flats are turning into a war zone. Kareem entrusts them to stay inside and lock all their doors and window. The group of youths move the safe down to the cellar for opening, while another group fool around with the new gear they looted from the police station. Kareem quickly shuts it down, reminding them that until the culprits are brought to justice, they are at war. He leads them to the entrance of the estate where they stand above waiting for the police. Meanwhile, a young officer named Jerome nervously plays with his nails as his unit makes their way to the estate to quell the uprising. They are given a brief before the operation begins. As the officers march out of the van, the media reports on the police concerns regarding a resident of Athena named Sebastian, who is suspected of acts of terrorism in Syria. Jerome looks terrified as they approach the aggressive youths chanting and shooting flares. The police use their riot shields to create a wall looking like some bootleg Spartans as they stand their ground. Meanwhile, Mokhtar, the oldest of the four brothers, watched the commotion from his apartment as his girlfriend complains to him about his behavior as a partner. Someone tell her this ain't the right time to be bringing up their Jerry Springer-level relationship issues. Mokhtar also feels the same, so he shuts her up by grabbing her. He's the local drug dealer, so he demands to know where the rest of his product is after one of his men notices it's not up. She quickly tells them the location. They finish packing it with the intention to move it along with some guns to a more secure place. The police are likely to storm the building at any moment. Mokhtar calls his contact inside the police to let him and his men through when they get to the barrier. They will be disguised as an ambulance rushing someone for emergency treatment. The dealers move through the apartment frantically, but when they prepare to drive out, it's blocked by the youths. One of the lads radios Kareem regarding the situation, but he doubles down on his no one leaves block policy. Mokhtar frustratedly punches him before ordering his men to leave the ambulance. Their new plan is to bury it at a shisha shop on the estate. As the dealers cross the courtyard, a group of youths recognize Mokhtar and start heckling questions about the contents of the bags they're holding. Their numbers start to grow as they get closer to the shisha shop, till the youths rush them to take the guns. Kareem shows up to question his older brother on which side he stands with, as their youngest has just been killed, but Mokhtar is more worried about his drugs being found. Kareem suspects there might be guns in the bags, but his big bro stops any attempt to grab the bag when he fires his gun. The youths stand down but threaten to come back when they are forced to leave because they receive word that the police are approaching the area. Meanwhile, in the estate mosque, the Muslim men gather to discuss how to navigate through the commotion and get the families out. Abdel is also present, so one man turns his frustrations out on him since his brother is the ringleader in all of this. The army officer stands his ground and demands no one harms Kareem. If anyone does find his brother, they are to bring Kareem before him. The imam asks his opinion on evacuation. Abdel agrees, but suggests that the fragile should be prioritized. While they do so, he will find his brother and talk to him. The imam also orders that Sebastian should be found and isolated before he puts people in danger. Abdel begins looking for his brother, but there is too much going on, so he can't get a solid lead on his location. As he moves through the blocks, he comes across Sebastian with earphones on, casually doing some gardening in Bliss, a direct contrast to the scenery around him. They move him to the now empty local nursery. Saber is ordered to stay with him while Abdel continues his search for Kareem at the family house. When he gets there, a group prayer is being held for Edir. His mother scolds him a little for being late, but as the prayer continues, Kareem also makes his appearance. Something smashes one of the windows in the room, causing the prayers to be cut short as the neighbors begin to evacuate. During the movement, Kareem leaves before his older brother can get a hold of him. Abdel asks their sister of his whereabouts, but it turns into a big argument between the two. He storms off and his attention is drawn towards the evacuation route. The army officer pushes his way forward to say his final goodbyes to his mother before she leaves. Shortly after, some of the men aiding in the withdrawal get into an altercation with the police because of a bit of pushing. Meanwhile, Kareem watches a live news feed on his phone reporting from his current location. So, he orders some of the boys to throw a fridge from the top floor which nearly hits an advancing police unit. They continue to throw household items at them. That was the final straw. The police begin to retreat as they get bombarded. Back at the top, Kareem's hand gets injured when he tries to throw back a flashbang on some Call of Duty behavior. but it explodes in his hand instead. As he makes his way to tend to his wound, he gets a voice message from his mother who is worried about his well-being. While dressing the burn, he overhears reports from a nearby TV regarding the recent findings from the investigation. From the footage circulating online, the police are confident that the attackers were not real police officers, but instead members of a small far-right group. Their main aim was to aggravate the already high tension during the past few weeks. Kareem turns the TV off, not wanting to hear that narrative. He begins to cry while he has a rare moment alone, looking at his little brother's picture. He snapped back to the current reality when he receives a message that the cops are making their way into Block 1. Kareem quickly sprints to the location with a couple of the lads and enters with a feeble flying kick and pointless punches against the riot shields. But with the help of his soldiers, they manage to push back the police using a big bin. Night falls and the defeated cops regroup behind their vans. Officer Mirage makes his way into a detention bus and apologizes to Abdel for his arrest. While releasing him, he requests they let the others go too, as they were only trying to help. But Murad explains that an investigation has to be completed before they are released. Abdel demands to go back inside the estate to talk to the youths, but that gets denied as the police are about to lock down the place. No one comes in or out. Their conversation is cut short when Murad is summoned by his commander, but before going, he assures Abdel that he will not get arrested again if he stays in the cop camp. Meanwhile, at Athena, Kareem gets his army rallied with a speech about not being the victims anymore, and how they will retaliate with the same violence inflicted on them. He reveals his plan to take a cop hostage till their demands are met. In the interim, Jerome, along with his police, move in large numbers to execute a night raid. Abdel disguises himself as a cop in order to sneak back in. The youth already anticipate the law enforcement's plan and meet them with a volley of flares and fireworks. They manage to grab one cop and quickly drag him away from the commotion. The other police close in fast and begin beating the kidnappers before they can go far. Jerome just stands there overwhelmed and confused on what to do. This guy is not built for this kind of work. Paper pushing would have been better. He tries to redeem himself by joining a beating occurring next to him to gain some brownie points, after which they receive the retreat order. While his fellow officers leave facing the threat, Jerome instead walks in a timid trance with his back facing his attackers. The cops get bombed till they are encircled. Kareem walks towards them dressed like an R&B artist performing on tour and throws a Molotov cocktail, which causes some of the cops to be set on fire. The law enforcement makes their final retreat, but the thick smoke causes Jerome to miss the cue, so he gets left behind. He realizes this and takes cover in one of the apartment blocks. While getting pursued, he manages to remove some of his police gear and finds a hoodie to blend in a bit more, but he is ultimately cornered by Kareem and his boys. They beat him a little before taking the policeman into custody. Meanwhile, Mokhtar and his men are still digging in the shop to hide their contraband. He frantically calls his contact in the police and aggressively berates him for not getting them out. Kareem has Jerome hostage and releases a video to the police demanding that they identify Eater's murderers and give them life sentences. If not, the hostage will get killed. Murad plays the footage for Abdel to identify the location. He knows the place and makes his way there solo when Murad's back is turned. As Kareem's brother, he gains access to the hostage location, only having to ruffle one guy before entering. He demands his brother let him take the hostage back to the police to stop this from escalating, but Kareem wants all the smoke. Abdel just takes Jerome and begins to walk out, but Kareem starts firing at them, forcing them to run for cover inside the shisha shop with Mokhtar. Abdel doesn't seem moved when his big brother starts getting emotional about the situation. Things take a drastic turn when Mokhtar finds out that Jerome is a cop. He suggests they kill him because he has seen what they are up to. Abdel instead recommends that they save the cop's life, which would make him a hero. He calls his police connect to arrange an evacuation of them and Jerome. Meanwhile, Kareem makes his way to the front of the shop with a Molotov cocktail, threatening to burn his brothers if they don't hand over his hostage. Kareem's boys start to break in through the back door. Abdel warns his little brother that the police are on their way down to their location, so he should dip, but Kareem still stays. The cops arrive. Abdel watches on whilst his younger brother tries to confront them, but he is shot dead before he can throw his cocktail. It explodes and burns him. Abdel screams and quickly rushes out to put out the fire that has engulfed his brother's body. Abdel cries over his dead corpse as he moves him to the shop, where he covers him with a white sheet. Mokhtar goes over to try and console his brother while suggesting they leave before things start to get hectic. In a fit of rage, Abdel starts repeatedly punching Mokhtar. The youth stand there shocked. Abdel asks anyone who does not want to stay to leave their weapons and go. Losing two brothers to police violence has turned Abdel to the dark side. He takes control of the youths to prepare their offensive. Murad calls him to explain that they didn't send the unit that just killed Karim, but Abdel just cuts the call. With a sinister look on his face, he orders some lads to take Jerome upstairs. Abdel then asks Sebastian to help them open the gun safe Karim took from the police station earlier. He goes upstairs where he hears reports from the news that the violence has spread to at least 30 cities. Jerome tries to share his condolences with Abdel. Meanwhile, Sebastian rigs a mini charge that opens the weapon safe. He begins shearing the guns out and orders the youths to start shooting. Abdel hears screams and gunshots, so goes to investigate while asking the residents to evacuate. Sebastian shows that the suspicions about him might have been right as he starts to plant gas bombs in the apartments. Abdel watches as rescuers take Karim's body to safety. He receives a call from Murad telling him to turn himself in, but he is only interested if his brother's murderers have turned themselves in. The cop explains that the culprits are not his men. This gets him agitated as he screams for the ones responsible to be brought before him. He meets Sebastian on his way up, but leaves him to carry on with his plan. Abdel orders one of the lads to start filming whilst he threatens to execute Jerome, but everyone pleads for him not to do it, so he shoots the ground next to him instead. Someone alerts them that Sebastian's plan is to blow up the building, so Jerome leaves with the youths and gets arrested with them. Meanwhile, Sebastian sets up the chargers on the same floor as Abdel. While he lays there accepting his fate, the building explodes as law enforcement investigate the structure. Footage of Idir's lifeless body plays. We see the moments just after the culprits committed the crime. They remove their police gear and make their way to a forest to burn the evidence. A tattoo is revealed on one of the bad actors' necks, hinting to it being the work of the far-right group alluded to earlier. This brings the movie to an end. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Thank you and see you on the next one.